I heard the sound before I saw anything. The kind of low, breathy moan that freezes the marrow in your bones. It slithered through the half-open door of the penthouse bedroom like a taunt, like a warning. For a second, my brain refused to process it, as if denying the truth might keep my world from cracking wide open. But then came the voice. Her voice. Soft. Familiar. Intimate in a way she hadn't been with me in months. God, don't stop. My stomach plunged so fast it felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I wasn't supposed to be home. Elena thought my flight from Chicago landed at midnight. She had no idea that a last-minute change put me back in the city 7 hours early. No idea that I'd come straight here, suitcase still in the trunk, eager, pathetically eager, to surprise her. For weeks she'd been distant. Late nights. Meetings. Work stress. And I believed her. I wanted to believe her so badly that every red flag had looked like a white lie painted over with excuses I spoon-fed myself. But standing here now, outside my own bedroom, with my wife's moans cutting through the silence, there was no more pretending. Something in me, something instinctive, primal, told me to turn around, to leave, to run before the final blow landed. But another part of me, the part still clinging to the ghost of who Elena used to be, needed to see. Needed proof. Needed the truth carved into my eyes so deeply that denial couldn't survive. My hand felt numb as I pushed the door open an inch wider. And there it was. Elena's bare back arched like a bowstring, sheets tangled around her legs. Her hair spilled over the pillow in the silky dark waves I used to run my hands through every night. Her nails were digging into someone else's shoulders. Broad, tanned, unmistakable shoulders. Mark Ellison. Her CEO. My boss's boss. He was the kind of man who looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. The tailored suits, the confident smirk, the quiet arrogance of someone used to owning everything he touched. I used to admire him. Hell, I even defended him whenever co-workers whispered rumors about him sleeping with staff. People exaggerate, I'd say. His demanding, not predatory. But now? Now he was in my bed. Inside my wife. Breathing in her ear the way I used to. I didn't realize I made a sound, but suddenly Elena twisted toward the door, eyes widening. For a heartbeat, her face was blank, like her brain couldn't comprehend what her eyes saw. Then all at once, horror, guilt, fear, panic. Ryan, she gasped. Mark jerked upright, scrambling for the sheets, one hand flying to cover himself. I didn't look away. Couldn't. My vision tunneled, my pulse roaring like a war drum. Every breath burned. Elena clutched the sheets around her chest. Ryan, please, this isn't, I can explain. Explain. My voice cracked. I didn't recognize it. It sounded like gravel scraping over broken glass. Explain what? That's you. My throat closed. Words collapsed. The three of us stared at each other, me frozen in the doorway, Elena shaking, Mark sitting up like a kid caught stealing. The room smelled like sex. Like betrayal so thick it made my lungs tighten. For a moment, I felt nothing. Then everything hit at once. Anger, sharp enough to slice. Humiliation, heavy as lead. Confusion, rapid fire and disorienting. And heartbreak, a raw, animal kind of pain that pulsed in my chest like a wound torn open. I stepped back. Then again. I couldn't breathe inside that room. Ryan, wait. Elena scrambled off the bed, wrapping the sheets around her like a makeshift dress. Please, don't go, don't walk away like this. I walked. I didn't run, didn't yell, didn't break anything. I just walked out of the room, down the hall, toward the kitchen, because I needed space. Air. A grounding point before I shattered. She followed, footsteps frantic behind me. Ryan, please. Please talk to me. But all I could hear was the echo of her moan. Soft, breathy, made for him. The kitchen lights hummed overhead as I gripped the counter, knuckles white. Elena hovered inches away, tears streaking her face. I'm sorry, she whispered, voice trembling. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. It happened. I was scared. Work has been stressful, and Mark. Don't. I closed my eyes, jaw tight. Don't blame work. Don't blame stress. Don't blame him. She recoiled. But she didn't deny it. And that hurt more than anything. Ryan, I love you. You know I do. This wasn't supposed to. Stop saying you love me, I snapped. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. You don't get to use that word right now, I continued, forcing each word out slowly, painfully. Not after tonight. Her face crumpled. She reached for me. I stepped back. A strangled little breath escaped her. Ryan, please. What? I looked at her, really looked at her. You want forgiveness? Right now? Minutes after you. My voice broke again. She shook her head. No. I just want to explain. Explain why you chose him. I asked, heat rising behind my eyes. Explain how long this has been going on. Explain whether I've been living with a stranger for months. She flinched. Hard. That told me more than any words could. How long? I demanded. Silence. Elena. How long? Her hands trembled. 3 months, she whispered. The number hit like a punch. 3 months. 90 days of lies. 90 nights where she told me she loved me before falling asleep. 90 mornings where she kissed me goodbye and walked straight into his office. I turned away so she wouldn't see the way that number broke something deep inside me. I never wanted it to happen, she said quietly. And I tried to end it, I swear. You tried. I laughed once, sharp, humorless. Elena, you don't trip and fall into an affair. You choose it. Every time. Every call, every lie, every night you stayed late at the office. Those were choices. I know, she said, voice cracking. I know. And I hate myself for it. Good. A small, vicious part of me welcomed that pain in her eyes. But it didn't fix anything. She tried again to touch me. I stepped back again, hitting the refrigerator. Her voice wavered. I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared you'd leave me. So you slept with someone else instead. She covered her mouth, sobbing. Somewhere behind us, footsteps sounded down the hall, heavy, hesitant. Mark. I didn't turn. Didn't need to. My blood already burned hot with the awareness of him. Ryan, he said from the doorway, voice cautious. I'm sorry. This is my fault. I take full responsibility. Shut up. The words came out so sharp he actually did. Elena, he said gently, ignoring me, maybe you should. Don't talk to her. I turned then, staring straight at him. Don't even look at her. His jaw tightened. But he didn't argue. He stood in my kitchen wearing only a bedsheet, hair mussed, skin flushed with the echoes of what he'd done with my wife. And I wanted to hit him. God, I wanted to hit him so badly I felt my fists curl without permission. But violence wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't unsee the scene burned into my brain. It wouldn't rebuild trust or dignity or the life I thought I had. So I just stared at him. And he looked away first. After a long, suffocating moment, he muttered, I'll give you 2 space, and retreated down the hall. Elena wiped her face with a trembling hand. Ryan, what do we do now? We. The word stung. I don't know, I said softly. I don't know anything right now. My eyes stung, but I refused to let tears fall. Not in front of her. Not in front of the woman who broke me with someone else's hands. She approached slowly this time, cautious, as if getting too close might spook me. Can we please talk? Really talk? Not tonight. God, I know tonight is the worst possible time. But tomorrow, or... Elena, I murmured. I can't think about tomorrow. She swallowed hard. Do you want me to leave? I hesitated. She was the one who betrayed me. She was the one who tore our marriage apart. She was the one who let someone else into our bed. And yet, part of me still loved her. That was the monstrous, humiliating truth. But love wasn't enough. Not anymore. Yes, I said finally, voice barely above a whisper. I think you should leave. Tears streamed down her face in silent rivers. She nodded slowly, like a marionette whose strings were being cut. Then she backed away, step by step, until she disappeared down the hall. Drawers opened. Closets. Zippers. Soft, muffled sobs. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just stood there, staring at the blank refrigerator door while pieces of my life scattered around my feet. When the front door finally closed behind her, the silence that followed was absolute. And in that silence, the truth crashed into me fully. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. But something else formed beneath the heartbreak. Something cold, deliberate, dangerous. A seed of resolve. A whisper that said, "You don't have to fall apart. You can rise. You can make them regret ever touching your life." I didn't plan revenge that night. But revenge started planning me. The next morning the apartment smelled like bleach and old coffee. I'd slept on the couch, fully clothed, the zipper of my jacket digging into my ribs. The sheets in our bed were cold and smelled faintly of aftershave that wasn't mine. When sunlight found a way past the curtains, it felt like an accusation. I moved through the apartment on autopilot, coffee, shower, the small rituals that used to be shared. Each tiny normalcy felt obscene. My phone buzzed with messages I avoided. Friends offering help, my mother calling with the old, tired instincts. Talk to her, Ryan, maybe there's an explanation. And even Mark, who had texted, "Can we talk? I'll come by and explain myself." That last message had the theatrical cadence of a man used to being forgiven. I didn't answer anyone. I needed to think. Or not think. I wasn't sure which was worse. Work was a maze I navigated without meaning. I let the train take me, sat pressed against the window and watched the city move along like another life. My co-workers' faces blurred into the background hum of fluorescent lights and keyboards. I took a desk, stared at my monitor, and realized I had no memory of the first 2 hours of emails. My head ached with a dull, persistent pressure, the kind that sometimes follows a concussion. Around 11, Maya from accounting found me in the break room, as if drawn by the same gravity that pulled me inward. She was a compact woman with a blunt bob and a mouth that never did small talk. When she looked at me, pity and an unreadable curiosity flickered across her face. "You okay?" she asked, coffee cup in hand. "No," I said. She nodded like that settled it. I heard. Her voice was low, careful. "Jesus, Ryan. I'm sorry." "Thanks." I tried a smile and it felt like a bad joke. How do people do this? Keep breathing. "Different people, different answers," she said. "Some break. Some build armor. Some plan." Plan. The word landed like a stone. I clung to it. "Do you know him well?" I asked suddenly, because I needed to know where Mark stood in the network of the company. If I was going to survive this, emotionally, professionally, practically, I needed information. Maya's jaw worked the way people's jaws do when they're measuring the cost of speaking. "His, complicated," she said finally. "Smart. Dangerous in a quiet way. People bend around him. And there are rumors, Ryan. Not a lot of hard evidence. He knows how to make things look like accidents. But if anyone could pull a match and burn the building down and walk out smelling like success, it's him." Rumors. I repeated. The coldness in my chest liked that word. No facts, only suspicion. "You want coffee?" she asked. "Sit down." We talked in fragments, the safe kind of talk where breasts of truth are exposed slowly, one small piece at a time. Maya told me things about power that felt familiar. How Mark wore loyalty like a crown and how he rewarded useful people and discarded the rest. She told me about whispered HR complaints that disappeared, about promotions given to those who smiled in the right way. She didn't mention affairs. She didn't need to. I could feel the history stitched into the pauses. "You should be careful," she said at the end. "If you want to do something, do it carefully. Don't make things worse." Thanks. I wanted to slap the woman and hug her at the same time. After work I went to the office roof and stood at the edge until the city buzzed around me like an organism breathing. The skyline looked like a row of teeth, sharp in the fading light. I wanted to tear everything out. The apartment, the marriage, the comfortable illusions. But I also wanted clarity. I wanted leverage. I wanted something concrete to hold when the world asked me to inhale again. Revenge is a seductive, dishonest thing. It promises satisfaction, then hands you the knife. I felt both hungry and nauseous. That night I didn't sleep. I walked through the city with no destination, the sounds of traffic and neon punctuating the hollow ache in my chest. I thought of Elena, how she'd looked when she said 3 months, the way her face crumpled, the small, defenseless way she tried to explain. I tried to imagine the first night, the first time she crossed a line. I pictured them in my bed, their bodies tangled, and each image cut like glass. The image that kept playing wasn't of their bodies. It was of her hands, hands that once folded my shirts, thumbed my hair, left notes in my briefcase. Those hands had betrayed me. The betrayal had a texture, the faint smell of Mark's cologne clinging to her sleeves, the small, intimate movements between them that I'd once reserved for us. Around midnight my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something, maybe superstition, maybe the sudden flaring of my curiosity, made me answer. Ryan. The voice was muffled, distorted. Not female. Not male, exactly, controlled, practiced. You don't know me. I can help. Who is this? I demanded. There are things you should see, the voice said. Quiet. Serious. If you want to know the truth, meet me at the old pier at 3. Come alone. I almost laughed. It sounded like the opening line of a bad movie, but the voice had a certainty that made the hair on my arms rise. Why would I trust you? I asked. Because I used to work for him, the voice said. And he should not have what he has. Then the line went dead. I stood on the sidewalk, phone clenched in my hand, heart hammering. The pier was a place of rust and echoes, a forgotten stretch of boards 2 miles from where I lived. It was a place criminals and desperate lovers used, a place where people could whisper without being heard. At 3 in the morning I was there, wrapped in a coat that smelled faintly like dust. The night air tasted sharp with salt. The pier creaked under my boots. A single lamp hummed, casting weak light across the water. I was alone for a while, thinking I'd been played. Then footsteps. A shadow detached itself from the dark and moved toward me. The person was small and hunched, wearing an oversized jacket and a hat pulled low. Up close, the voice belonged to a man with a cigarette that burned down to his fingers and a face that had been folded by life into something weary. You're not with the cops? I asked first. Nope. He shot a look at me. You aren't either? Good. He introduced himself as Lewis, former IT contractor, recently dismissed for, well, that was complicated. He had the kind of nervous energy people get when they've carried secrets too long. I worked for Mark, he said. On and off. He's a genius with access control. Cameras, servers, cloud accounts. He likes to control narratives. He sets things up so people owe him. Or he sets them up and then takes what he wants. What do you mean? I asked, my voice small in the salt air. He leaned in, like rules around us. Cameras, he said. Hidden cameras in executive offices. In meeting rooms. In other places. Mark records. He keeps evidence on private servers. He's got leverage over a lot of people. And he doesn't just keep it for kicks. He uses it. My gut clenched. Used on whom? Employees. Vendors. People who accidentally sleep with him. People he once moved. People who complain to HR. He collects ammunition. His eyelids fluttered. If you want revenge, Ryan, you don't need to shout. You need to show what he's done. If those files exist, and I believe they do, then they can do more than humiliate him. They can stop him. What does this have to do with Elena? I asked. Lewis flicked his cigarette into the water, watching the ember spit before he answered. If Mark has recordings of her, he could make her stay. That's how he kept people in line. Blackmail, whispers, fear. She could have been trapped. The word hit in a very different way than betrayal. Trapped implied choice taken away. If it were true, I had to rethink everything. The anger, the rage, the neat lines I'd drawn between villain and victim. Do you have anything? I asked. He reached into his jacket and handed me a small, battered USB drive. This is a scrap. Enough to point you. I couldn't take more without being noticed. But it ties him to servers in Jersey. If you want to dig, go through a lawyer. Or go through me. Quietly. There's more. I can get it. But it'll cost you. Information isn't free. I put the USB in my pocket like a weapon. It felt heavier than it should. On the ride home, the city changed. Streetlights smeared past, each one a small, indifferent star. I thought of Elena's face, how quickly human features could rearrange into accusations, into weakness, into something I had to overcome. The idea that she might have been coerced while all the while my rage had sculpted her into a villain felt like a splinter beneath my skin. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it complicated my fury, gave it edges that needed cutting. Back at my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the USB as if it were an invitation and a trap. The house hummed with the absence of her breath. I wanted to plug the drive into my laptop right then. Immediacy felt like control, but Lewis had said be careful. Lawyers. Strategy. The thought of doing anything rash made my teeth ache. Instead, I called my sister, Jenna. She picked up on the second ring, voice bright and practical. You sound awful, she said, as if we were in the same room. You have to come over, I said. Bring patience. She arrived with a bag of takeout and the sort of tenderness that had always anchored me. We sat at the table, ate under the dim lamp, and sometimes the comfort was so ordinary it hurt in its sweetness. When she finally asked the question, "Are you going to do anything?" I hesitated. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to conjure a plan that would obliterate Mark, clear my throat of the taste of betrayal. Instead I said, I don't know yet. But I have something. A lead. She frowned at me. Be careful, Ryan. Revenge has teeth. I know. I lied. That night I didn't sleep again, though for different reasons. The USB lay on the table like a sleeping animal, full of possible menace. By morning I had decided to do one thing. Gather facts. Not rumors. Not revenge theater. Facts. If Mark had been collecting, if he'd been coercing, if Elena had been trapped under a web of threats and recordings, then exposing him wasn't just vindication, it was justice. But justice is greedy. It asks for more than one person's pain. It asks for the ruin of another's life. The thought of being the instrument of someone's destruction made my hands shake. Still, when Elena's number flashed across my phone midday, my grip tightened. Meet me at 7. Please. I need to tell you something. I stared at the message, thumb hovering like it was a guilty animal. I typed back, fingers trembling. Where? She answered, Riverside Cafe. Table by the window. Please. I told myself I was going because I needed answers. I told myself everything. A litany of rationalizations I used to keep my life in order. But the truth was simpler and more knotted. I needed to look at her face and know whether she had been a co-conspirator or a captive. If Mark's shadow had stretched into our bed, if he had recorded and blackmailed and controlled, then the shape of betrayal shifted. My anger would remain, but it would no longer be the only force guiding me. At 7, the Riverside Cafe smelled like coffee and rain and other people's conversations. Elena was already there, hands clasped around a mug like it was a talisman. She looked older in the hard, exhausted way people do when they carry secrets. Her eyes met mine and, for the first time since the night on the bed, I saw something other than shame. There was fear. And beneath it, a fragile, dreadful hope. Ryan, she whispered when I sat, voice small. I looked at her, at the woman who'd undone our life, and felt the world contract to the span of her face. What did he want? I asked. She inhaled, as if the answer would burn. He wanted access. He told me if I didn't help him with a client, he'd make sure it went badly. Then it turned into more. He recorded things. He said he'd make them public. He said it would ruin me, ruin you. He said, she broke off, fingers white on the mug. The words were a confession and an accusation and a plea all at once. They reshaped everything I'd been holding. I'm sorry, she said, the words thin as a wafer. I didn't know how to get out. The cafe music swelled, a lullaby for the ruined. I wanted to believe her. Part of me did. Part of me wanted to pin her down for every lie and make the truth simple and righteous and singular. But human stories are messy. Betrayal is rarely one note. If Mark had been the serpent, then Elena had been bitten, and maybe, bit back in ways I couldn't yet parse. Outside, the river slid past like time, indifferent, patient. Inside, our lives were rearranging themselves into something new. I left the cafe with the USB burning a hole in my jacket and a new, dangerous clarity. If Mark had his blackmail, I would find his archive. If he had his cameras, I would map where they pointed. If he had levers, I would test them. And if Elena was telling the truth, if she had been trapped, then the rage I'd felt the night before would have to share space with something colder. A resolve to pull him down. Either way, I would not be the man who cried and crumpled on his kitchen floor. I would be the man who made choices. I would make them carefully. The plan, such as it was, moved like a careful animal, each step deliberate, each breath measured. Lewis delivered the next piece the way men pass contraband. Eyes darting, hands shallow in pockets, the city a protective fog around us. He'd risked more for me now, access credentials, a map of servers, timestamps that matched the nights Elena told me she'd been at meetings. It was enough to find the backbone of Mark's archive, the places where he kept the evidence he used like currency. We met in a dim cafe that smelled of espresso and damp wool. Lewis handed me a laptop wrapped in a second-hand jacket like a relic. "This will get you into the regional server," he murmured. "But if you poke the wrong places he'll know. He's paranoid. He's watched for that. You leak anything directly to the public, he'll trigger backups, and everything disappears. He's got redundancy." "So what do we do?" I asked. My voice sounded foreign, lower, steeled. There was a part of me that tasted the heady sweet of power. The rest, the part that still remembered Elena's hands in mine, recoiled. "You don't leak. You weaponize," Lewis said bluntly. "You give it to people who can't be silenced. Board members with reputations to protect. A trusted journalist with reach. Lawyers who can move like a blade. Make it legal. Make it unstoppable." I thought of Mark's face in my kitchen, calm, like a man who believed he could take what he wanted. I thought of Elena's whispered cries in the Riverside Cafe. The dual images, villain and victim, no longer fit neatly into a single frame. There were margins, shades, and corners I hadn't yet illuminated. I called Jenna. I told her in pieces, about the USB, about Lewis, about servers in Jersey and backdoors and the risk. She listened, and then with the no-nonsense practicality that had soothed me since childhood said, "Get a lawyer. Don't do this yourself." I did. The lawyer's name was Simone Patel. Her eyes were sharp like a scalpel. She asked a few pointed questions, then made a few pointed promises. Confidentiality, a methodical legal assault, a leak that would be surgical, if we had the evidence. She agreed to meet with Lewis's material. She advised against public theatrics. "If you want him brought down," she said, "you don't destroy yourself in the process." So we began to build. Simone with her quiet competence, Lewis doing the dirty technical work under the radar, Jenna serving as the human frantic connective tissue between my chaos and logic. I felt like a man assembling armor out of shards of his life. At night, when the city lay quiet and the apartment hummed with the absence of her breath, I'd sit with the laptop closed like a grudge in my lap and stare at the ceiling. Sleep was a haunt now, every dream a flicker of the bed scene, every waking a prickling need to act. We found things. Files of conversations. Videos with timestamps. Emails that felt like chokeholds. The archive was clinical in the same way cruelty often is, methodical, tidy. There were recordings of meetings spliced into private moments, of promises twisted into threats. There were also files that made my head swim. Footage of employees sobbing in conference rooms, executives bargaining in corridors, a pattern of calculated leverage that spread like an oil slick across the company. And then one folder caught me by the throat. Labeled, E. Ryan, 1102. I opened it with the reluctance you reserve for wounds. The file was short, 10 minutes. My name in a digital caption was jarring. The footage showed a man and a woman in an office late at night. The man, Mark, was talking softly, offering an opportunity. The woman, Elena, Was refusing. He leaned closer, the camera angle coy. There was a flash of something else. Disgust? Fear? Resignation? On Elena's face. She reached into her purse and slipped something small to the man. Cash? A note? The gesture was like a trade. Then Mark's hand found her knee and the camera cut. Later files, time-stamped, dated, showed private conversations where Mark whispered about insurance and positions and keeping people pliant. He didn't always need to force. Sometimes he nudged and then documented. The files read like a ledger of favors and debts, a ledger that explained why people hesitated to speak. As I watched, rage rose, but it was tempered now by a sick, cold comprehension. The ledger explained coercion, yes, but it didn't erase choices. It complicated them. The problem with complexity is that it leaves you with a messy, human truth. People do awful, contradictory things when they are being pressured and when they are trying to survive. The next day Simone scheduled meetings with the board's audit committee. We handed files to the one director who owed nothing to Mark, someone principled and terrified at the same time. We reached out to a journalist at a national paper with a reputation for surgical exposés. The journalist sniffed, asked questions that felt invasive but necessary, and promised to hold until we gave the green light. The pressure built like thunder. Mark's office was a silent war room. I could imagine him. Maybe he already knew. Maybe he was counting on being insulated by money and men who feared him. He was probably watching. He was always watching. We were ready to strike. The day the articles appeared, the city vibrated with a different pitch. Simone put a call through in the morning. We go today. The story hit in the afternoon. Investigative pieces laid out the archive's contours, the patterns of coercion, the company's shabby HR responses. Mark's name was in the headline. Video clips accompanied the story, carefully redacted in places but clear enough that people gasped. In the days that followed, Mark's kingdom began to fracture. Board members resigned. Investors demanded answers. The legal inquiries mounted like an advancing tide. He retreated into statements and lawyers, the self-assured mask cracking at the edges. And Elena? She didn't show up at public hearings. She didn't call to gloat, didn't send a single message of triumph. Instead she vanished from the apartment like smoke, leaving nothing but a folded note on my kitchen table. The note was halting, precise. Her handwriting was small, the letters close together like someone trying not to take up too much space. Ryan, I'm sorry in ways I don't have words for. I didn't want to hurt you. I was small in the face of something that felt enormous. I thought I could make choices that kept us both safe. I was wrong. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm telling you the truth. He used us. He used me. He made things filthy and then told me they were our fault. He told me if I didn't cooperate, he'd destroy you. I couldn't let that happen. I left because staying would have made you collateral. I stayed long enough to get you the leverage you needed without you knowing. I know how that sounds. I am not a hero. I am not a victim in neat boxes. I am many things. I love you. I am sorry. Be careful. There it was. The twist I'd been hoping for and dreading. She had been both betrayer and saboteur. She had slept with Mark, maybe willingly at first, maybe not, maybe to gain proximity so she could collect proof. Or maybe she had been trapped, given the choice of ruin or compliance. The truth was now woven from both threads. Anger and relief braided inside me in a way that left no clean resolution. She had betrayed me. She had also been trying, in some way, to protect me. It didn't absolve her. It complicated my culpability for my desire to punish, and for the small, dark victory I felt at seeing Mark fall. The fallout was a slow rain. Mark resigned under pressure. Regulators opened inquiries. The stock dipped like a thermometer reading fever. The company erected committees and apologized on camera. Mark's reputation, once gilded, crumbled. He was stripped of power, left with lawyers and silence. In the months that followed, I learned more. Elena had indeed been gathering through a different, quieter method, emails, late meetings, whispered confessions from people she'd coaxed into trust. She had passed some things to me indirectly, notes, hints, crumbs that led to Lewis and the USB. She had placed herself in danger. Whether she'd originally been willing or coerced, she had chosen later to help destroy him. When she finally called, months later, the voice on the line was steadier than I expected. She had been in another city, starting over, working at a non-profit that had nothing to do with the world she'd come from. The thing inside me that loved her stirred with the slimmest of hopes. The thing that felt battered and weary put up its hands. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "I thought I was protecting you," she said simply. "I thought if you knew, you'd be targeted. I thought if I could bring him down quietly, maybe we could pretend none of this had happened. I was wrong. You left me without a choice." "You left me without a choice," she echoed. And this time I heard the echo as a shared fact rather than a rebuke. We spoke for hours that night, carefully, like two people unpicking a sweater that had been burned. She told me things that hurt and healed. I told her how seeing her back there had broken me. Neither explanation erased the damage. But we kept talking, which felt, in itself, like progress. In the end there was no cinematic revenge staged in my kitchen, no humiliating public spectacle of Elena's moral downfall. The dramatic payoff had been subtler and, in some ways, harsher. Mark's ruin came from proof and legal pressure, not my fist. Elena's absence became its own punishment and its own protection. I never idealized the idea of getting even again. Revenge, I learned, is a blunt instrument. The true reclaiming of power was quieter, choosing truth over spectacle, choosing to wield evidence in ways that sheltered the vulnerable rather than destroyed the already broken. Months later, walking along the river where we'd met with Lewis and where rivers slide indifferent and patient, I found myself calmer. The city still had teeth. Mark's absence left a different skyline, a rearranged architecture of power. I still carried the scars, inside, where they mattered. I still loved Elena in ways I couldn't yet unpack. And I still mourned the simple life we'd had before choices and coercion and secrecy complicated the map. At a bench, I sat and watched the water move. In the pocket of my jacket was a small flash drive, the same one that had started the avalanche, now inert but heavy with meaning. I thought about what justice looked like, not a hammer blow, but a precision cut that exposed rot and let light in. The last twist wasn't a betrayal at all but a revelation, that people often live in the ugly spaces between villain and victim. Sometimes the person who hurts you most also saves you in the only way they know how. Sometimes the line between sin and salvation is a single, trembling step. I didn't get everything back. I didn't expect to. Some things were gone, irretrievable. But in taking down the man who built a kingdom on other people's ruin, I reclaimed part of myself. And that, in the end, felt like a kind of victory. Messy, incomplete, and painfully human.